Welcome to USA Gymnastics. This course is the T210 2014-2015 program update. I'm your host, Lakeisha Hutchison, and we have Patty Connor, who is the Technical Committee Chair for Trampoline and Tumbling, here to cover the course for the T210 update.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Welcome to the course. The T210 is something that is fairly new to the Trampoline and Tumbling community. This is our second year to do this. The JO Committee and the Technical Committee decided that it was extremely important for not only judges to hear the updates each year, but also for coaches to hear them as well. So I'd like to welcome you to this new annual requirement, and hopefully today that you will take away some information that is useful to you as a coach or a judge. Now, the goal of this course is also to provide coaches and judges with the current information, the current updates, anything that has come up during the past year as far as rule changes or clarification. What we'd like to do, of course, is increase the quality of our athletes' performance, and the way that we do that is to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the interpretation of rules, how we apply them on the field display is extremely important. We want to provide every single athlete that steps on to the competition floor a level playing field. So making sure that everyone is understanding and applying those rules in the same manner is extremely important. So hopefully today that's one of the things that we will do with this course. Now, the requirements for the T210, of course, is that you participate and follow along today. You have to actively participate. There are some slides that have information on them that you will need for the testing component at the end. So it is important that you actively participate. We want you to be sure that you get all of the information. Once you have the information, you will be asked to take an exam at the end. Once you have completed this exam successfully, then this T210 certification will automatically post to your My Profile page under your course history. Now, the T210, the course and exam must be completed prior to you being on this floor of a sanctioned event beginning January 1st, 2016. So it's extremely important that you make sure that you not only do the webinar, but that you also follow the procedure and take the exam as well. Now, the way that the course is structured is that we're going to go through information that's extremely important. One of the things that we need you to understand is that not everybody just does one discipline. So some of you may be a tumbling coach or a tumbling judge. Some of you may be a trampoline coach, a trampoline judge. But we do need to cover all of the information in this webinar. So we appreciate your patience as we cover the information. It's going to be on the test as well. If you are a trampoline coach or judge, you will be required to answer the questions about tumbling. The good news about that is you will have access to this PowerPoint. You can scroll back through the PowerPoint in order to look up your answers. So we'll help you along with that. Now, during the past year when we did the T210, there was a lot of questions that came up during the year. And, of course, during the year when we are at competition, questions come up about the interpretation of rules, how rules are applied. And in every single circumstance, it seems like that maybe there is a little bit of difference in how rules are applied all over the United States. So we want to make sure that the questions that came up the previous year are all taken care of and answered. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a few slides, and we're going to look at some things that have come up over the past year. Now, we're going to start with tumbling. And, of course, you know, if you are a tumbling judge, these are things that came up that you will need to really pay close attention to so that when you are on the competition floor that you are applying these rules in this manner. And one of the first questions that we got was, in the code points it does say that a run is determined by specifics. And I got a call this year about really what determines a run. So beginning at level 4, a lot of our passes are required to begin with a run. So the athletes must take 3 more steps, running steps prior to the run. The power hurdle is not considered one of these steps. So if the athlete does a 1 or 2-step run, then the hurdle is not considered part of that run. So you want to be sure, coaches, that you're making sure that the athlete is actually taking more, at least 3 or more steps when they start that run. Okay, what determines a good whip back? Well, every coach has a little bit of a different technique on how they're going to teach an athlete a whip at. What we have to determine is that technique is not necessarily judged good or bad unless it is good or bad technique. So what are the judges looking for in a whip at? Well, the first thing was the rhythm of the routine affected by the improper or proper technique. Usually improper technique slows the pass down. It'll cause maybe a pause in the middle of the routine if the whip is too high. So that's what we're looking for, is a consistent rhythm down the floor. Of course, where the legs and toes together. When an athlete comes out of the tumbling floor, no matter what the skill is, the legs should always be together and the toes should always be pointed. Of course, there's a few different schools of thought on where the arms should be, but as long as they're efficiently producing that speed and length that we're looking for, then there's not a deduction as long as they are straight. So that's what we're going to look for in the arms there. And then, of course, was the whip stretched to at least the length of the athlete's body? What we are looking for is that athlete to be traveling down the tumbling floor and be progressively gaining speed. So that whip needs to either increase the pass in speed or maintain that speed. Now the next question has to do with that takeoff zone, penalty zone, and landing zone and area at the end of the tumbling floor. So we're going to go over just a few examples here of how the deductions would be applied depending on where the athlete takes off and where the athlete lands. The first one is the athlete that is required to take off in the takeoff zone. So beginning at level 6, this shows you an example of if an athlete is required to take off in the takeoff zone, what would be considered the takeoff zone. So you notice the athlete's feet are partially in the track and partially in the takeoff zone. So this athlete would have met the requirements of taking off in the takeoff zone because any part or all of the foot is within the lines of the takeoff zone. The next example shows you an athlete that is taking off with a portion of their feet in the takeoff zone and a portion of their feet in the penalty zone. Now, the penalty zone is the red zone that connects the tumbling floor to the landing area. Now, in this particular situation, the athlete is going to be considered in the penalty zone because part of their foot is within the lines of the penalty zone. So each judge would apply a 3/10 deduction to their execution score. Now, the athlete may land in the penalty zone, and that is not a deduction, unless a portion of their foot is still in that takeoff zone. If it is, and it is a somersaulting skill, beginning at level 7, they're required to land in the landing area. So if they land in that penalty zone, then there is going to be a deduction for landing on the track, which is 0.2. Now, this next example shows you an athlete that has a portion of their feet in the penalty zone, and their heels are actually in the landing area or the landing zone. Now, this athlete, if they're performing a somersault, is considered within the boundaries of the landing area or the landing zone. So this pass is going to be interrupted. We don't want any skill that is a somersault taking off of that surface because it's not as solid of a surface as the tumbling track would be. So we do want that somersault to take off of a good, stable, solid surface. So in this particular instance, the athlete would be interrupted because that skill is taking off in an improper area. Now, beginning at youth elite, if there are any skills within the boundaries of the landing zone or area, the pass is interrupted at that point. This includes, of course, back handspring. So starting at youth elite, if the athlete performs any skills in this landing area, that would cause an interruption. Our lower levels, where they're doing back handsprings, those back handsprings are allowed in the area. The only thing that would be interrupted in this area would be a somersault. Now, interruptions or deductions. A lot of times we're not certain whether flaws within a skill would create an interruption or if it causes simply a deduction. So some of the questions that have come up this year is an athlete allowed to touch their knees in a back roll? An athlete allowed to slide their hands in a cartwheel? And can they use their hands on the floor to stand up during a front roll? So the answer to these 3 questions and others that are similar to these would be yes, yes, and yes. All of these infractions are simply flaws within the skill. It would be simply like bent elbows, bent arms, split feet, legs apart. These are the same thing. They don't change the skill into something else, so it's not going to constitute a fall, or it's not a spot, so it's not going to cause an interruption. Now, there are situations that an execution judge would take the appropriate execution deduction And it would depend on how severe the flaws are within the skill. So, for example, did they barely brush their knee in the back row, or did they actually have to put weight on their knee in the back row? So that would kind of depend on whether I took a 1/10, a 3/10, or a 5/10. Remembering that always that the maximum that I can take is 0.5 for each individual skill. So the athlete is still going to get credit for these skills. However, there will be a deduction. Now, we have a lot of athletes who tend to use what is considered a sting mat or a landing mat over the landing area in tumbling. One of the things that the FIG has done is created equipment specs and guidelines for us. And one of the things that they have in the rules is that every mat that is used in the tumbling landing area or on the tumbling floor must be adhered to the full landing area. So if anything is used in this area, it has to be strictly adhered. So it either has to be Velcroed to the top of the tumbling landing area or it has to be a full cover. So any extra matting that an athlete might request or that a coach might think about using, you need to be sure that that mat is firmly adhered to the full landing area. This is just for safety and to avoid injury. We want to make sure that every athlete is safe, especially in that final skill on the tumbling floor. Another big question that we have in tumbling, of course, since we require those athletes to take off and land in a specific area, if you've noticed a lot of times coaches will use some type of a signal, whether it be placing their foot up on the floor or placing something on the floor to indicate to their athlete where they should take off. And a lot of coaches and judges have asked, is this allowed? Well, the answer to that is yes, it is. With a few stipulations. As long as the item is firmly adhered to the floor, exactly like the landing area requirements are. So Velcro is okay. Tape that can be stuck to the floor is okay. But things that would not be allowed would be, a lot of times I'll see a coach maybe have their schedule in their pocket and they'll take the schedule out, place the schedule where they want them. So a loose piece of paper or anything that is not able to attach to the floor would not be allowed. Again, for safety reasons, we do not want those types of things up on the tumbling floor just in case. Now, coaches are allowed to put their foot up on the side of the tumbling floor. This is not really considered coach's assistance because we want to make sure that those athletes take off in the proper place so that they do have a safe landing in the landing zone or the landing area. This is kind of like the coach coaching before the routine starts, which is not any deduction or interruption. They are signaling, but it's not something that they are doing after the routine has begun or they're not saying anything out loud. Now, the one thing that you do need to remember, coaches, that if you are placing things on the floor, that you always remove that item before the next competitor goes. We want to make sure that if you are placing Velcro on the floor, that the next competitor doesn't accidentally see that piece of Velcro rather than their own. So anytime you place anything on the tumbling floor, whether it be Velcro or tape, or your foot, it all needs to be removed before the next competitor goes. The next thing we're going to talk about is that rebound at the end of the tumbling routine. Now, the intention of this rebound and the reason why it was put into the routine is to help coaches and athletes learn that proper blocking technique for those somersaulting skills. Unlike the requirements for the preceding skills that we are requiring that athletes travel down the floor, we want to see more vertical movement rather than horizontal on the tumbling floor with this rebound. So some of the things that we're going to look for, of course, is that rebound is super tight, that it has a very slight backward movement, and that upon completion of the skill, the arms straighten above the head. Now, that arms, they can press down in front, kind of down towards the side, towards the floor. Some of the things that would not be acceptable, of course, is bent arms, a really deep squat when they land because that's more of a jump rather than a rebound. What you want is an automatic reaction out of the floor. So the athlete's body is very tight. So when they hit that floor, it's an automatic bounce. They come out of the floor very tight and very fast. A full arm circle, of course, would cause a deduction, because you don't do a full arm circle when you're going into a somersault. So you want to see that same movement in the body that you would see if the athlete is working the drill in order to set that last somersault up. So you're going to see a quick snap of the feet down, the arms come straight up, the top of the body comes straight up as well. That's what a good rebound looks like, and that's what we're looking for as judges. Now, as far as tumbling pass is concerned, what we're looking for during that tumbling pass is a very good stretch, progressively fast skills that are tight and moving down the floor. Again, consistent rhythm throughout the pass. Now, one of the things that we do as tumbling judges, we don't only use our eyes to judge tumbling, but we're also using our ears. We're listening for that rhythm on the floor, and we want to hear a consistent, speedy rhythm, hand feet to feet rotation down the floor that is showing that the athlete is hitting those perfect angles as they're coming out of those skills in order to transition into the next skill. Of course, the other thing that we're looking for is no deviation from that center line. There are deductions if the athlete is off that center line. Anytime the athlete has both feet off to the left or off to the right of that line, each individual execution judge is going to take a tenth of a point from their execution score for that particular skill. Now, if the athlete has perfect skills and they remain off that line, we are still going to take that deduction. So if your athlete does move off the line, it's better for them to move back to the center because that's really what we're looking for. And then a strong kick out at 12 o'clock or between 12 and 1 on that last skill, holding a good straight body position until horizontal. Now, we talked about that last year, about that holding or keeping position where you want to see that athlete really hold a long straight body until they hit horizontal, and then they can start making that preparation for landing. And then, of course, a controlled landing. We want that athlete to show that they are in control of that last skill, so you shouldn't see steps either forwards or backwards or to the side. You want them to come into that landing surface and show that they were in control. Next discipline that we're going to talk about, of course, is trampoline. One of the questions that came up this year is, how is that synchro score determined? Well, it kind of depends. If you're using a time of flight or synchro machine, or if you're using judges to judge that synchronization, they are taking deductions based on the lack of synchronization between the two athletes. So when we're looking at the trampoline, here's kind of what we're looking for. If the deductions are between 0 and 5, of course, if the athletes are landing simultaneously, then those synchro judges or that machine is not taking a deduction at all. If the athlete, if the difference between athlete A and athlete B is from the trampoline bed to about ankle height, then the judges are going to take 0.1. If the difference in landing between athlete A and B is from trampoline to shin height, then we're going to take 0.2 for that synchro score. The difference in landing between athlete A and B from trampoline bed to about thigh height is going to be 0.3. And then if it is between trampoline bed to hip height, we're going to take 4. And if it's trampoline to waist, we're going to take 0.5. Now, if you have two athletes that are more than about a half scale apart, then the routine is going to be interrupted. So normally what we're looking for here is that one athlete is in the trampoline bed and the other one is at least halfway through the other skill or is showing that preparation for landing or that third phase of the skill, which we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. So that's kind of how the synchro deduction works and those synchro judges. Now, of course, the synchro machine is a little bit more specific than maybe the human eye would be. So a lot of times you will see scores that may be just a little bit lower when you're using that synchro machine for that synchro score. Now, the other thing that we're going to use that time of flight or synchro machine for is the time of flight. We have added the time of flight into the scoring process at all the national events for level 10 to senior elite. And what we've done is the FIG added time of flight into the rules in 2011. A lot of different reasons why. Of course, one of the biggest reasons is that it adds an objective component to that total score. So that kind of takes the human element out of it and the subjectivity of trampoline. And so it puts something in that the athlete has a little bit more control of. Now, the way that this works is the time of flight is added to the counting execution scores and, of course, the difficulty in those optional routines. And then it is used in the total score. It's used for both the compulsory routine and the optional routine. And beginning last year, we included this at all level 10 and above events for all of our national events. So it's a good idea if you guys have access to a time of flight machine, or, of course, if you just have that good old stopwatch that you help those athletes understand about why time of flight is so important to their score, because it does make a big difference. Now, what we're looking for as far as a good trampoline routine, of course, we're looking for those skills to be performed in the middle of the trampoline bed. That big red box, rectangle box is there for a purpose, and we are taking deductions if they are not within that box. So your goal here is to remain over that red cross in the middle of the trampoline bed. Of course, the other thing that we're looking for is that the scales are tight with legs and toes pointed, that the arms are straight and above the head and or close to the body. And, of course, that that athlete hit really good tight positions and had a sharp opening between 10 and 2 o'clock, that they held that position until horizontal. Again, that holding or keeping, extremely important for that athlete to come into that last phase of the skill showing a good, long, straight body. And then, of course, that there was no travel outside the box. Now, the box is marked in the center. The deductions are on either end, and the deduction is 0.1 anytime you are outside that box. Like we discussed in tumbling, if you are off the center line in tumbling, same thing applies in trampoline. If you're not within the boundaries of the box and you are on either end, even if your skills are perfect, you're still taking that 1/10 of a point deduction for travel. Now, the one thing that is an exception to this rule is if the athlete is outside the box on either side of the trampoline. Now, there possibly will be deductions for execution because of improper takeoff, because that's most likely what caused that travel over to the side of the trampoline. But there's not going to be that travel deduction if they're on either side, only end to end. And then, of course, if they traveled from one end to the trampoline to the opposite end outside the box, then that deduction is going to be 0.2. So this has a big factor on their score as well. So really work on keeping those skills, setting them up straight, making sure they stay inside that box. And then, of course, the other thing that we're looking for in trampoline is an increase of amplitude of the skills or the maintenance of the height through the routine. That athlete needs to maintain or gain height throughout the skill, throughout the routine. So we want to make sure that they're having plenty of time to hit the 3 phases of the skill, which we'll discuss that here in just a few minutes. Another question that came up this year is, what is the deduction if an athlete touches their feet on the bed of the trampoline during a front or back landing, for example, on a back drop or a stomach drop? Well, this action is really, it's just called incidental contact with the bed. So we are going to take a deduction, but if the deduction is within our 5/10. So it kind of depends on how severe the incidental contact is. If it is just a light tap with the feet, of course, it's not going to be a very big deduction. But if the athlete has the legs bent more severely and there's more of a strong contact or more of a touch more than just maybe the heels, maybe more the soles of the feet or the tops of the feet if they're on their stomach, then that would cause probably a bigger deduction. Now, the one thing that will not just cause a deduction is if the contact creates other faults. For example, if the contact is so great that it causes the athlete to have trouble getting back to their feet, then that most likely is going to cause another deduction or another consequence. For example, if it keeps them from maintaining the elasticity of the bed and they're unable to come to their feet and they lose the complete elasticity, then it'll cause an interruption. Or if the athlete touches their feet in a transition from one skill to the other. For example, on a cruise, if they hit their stomach and they are trying to achieve that upright position with a half twist in order to create the cruise, and they drag their feet in between those 2 skills, that would be an interruption. Now, the chair of the judges panel is going to call this, whether it's an interruption or whether or not the execution judges are just going to take a deduction from their score. Another thing is a lot of times we'll have coaches come up that will have an athlete who has either been interrupted because they did not hit the position of a skill, or they will come up and question why they did not get difficulty for a skill. And one of the biggest questions is, well, they hit that position, where you guys call them position at because they hit it. Well, what we're looking for as judges is the 3 phases to every skill. Of course, the first phase is just that takeoff phase. So the only thing that should be happening here is the athlete should be setting the skill up in this phase. So it should be nice, tall, stretched body. The arms should be above the head. The head should be between the shoulders, legs and toes pointed. Now, the second phase is the performance of the skill. This is where everything happens. So you're going to actually see position here. You are going to see an extension or an opening here. this is where we call position. So it's technically between 10 and 2 o'clock, or at the pinnacle of the scale, at the top of the scale. Now, this is going to be called either by a difficulty judge, or if the chair of the judges panel is doing difficulty as well, then that will be their job as well. Now, that third phase, the only thing that should be happening is preparation for landing. So as a judge, I don't want to see anything happening in that third phase other than preparation for landing. So there should be no twisting. There should be no extension or kick out during this phase of the skill, and your somersault should be complete by this time. So what we're looking for is phase 1 is set up for the skill, the second phase, the performance, the position and extension, and of course that third phase, which is preparation for landing. All we want to see is them making preparations to come in contact with that landing surface. And of course the last discipline that we're going to talk about is double mini trampoline. First question in double mini was, what is the deduction for that red penalty zone in the middle of the double mini if they touch it with any part of their foot? Now, of course, the goal of the athlete is to either perform a mounter skill or a spotter skill, and depending on which type of a routine they're going to do will depend on how many times they make contact with the double mini bed, which will determine, if they touch the red, how many times they will get a deduction. Now, the first contact with the double mini bed is kind of like a mulligan in golf. It's kind of a do-over kind of deal. We don't give you a deduction if on the first contact you touch that red zone. So first contact is a freebie. Now, if you perform a mounting skill and you touch it with your toes when you mount, and then when you land that mounting skill and your toes touch it again, then we're going to apply a 3/10 deduction from each execution judge's score. Now, this deduction can possibly be applied a maximum of 2 times. That's going to happen on a spotter skill. So they mount the double mini, toes touch it on their straight jump. When they jump over on their straight jump, their heels touch it. And then again, when they perform their spotter skill, they come down on the spotter bed and a portion or all of their feet are in the red. This would take a deduction. Now, the way this deduction works, it doesn't matter whether it's just your toes or it's your entire foot. The 3/10 deduction is applied if you touch any part of that red penalty zone in the middle of the double mini. Now, you notice there are red zones on either end of the double mini, and there's also red along the edges of the double mini. Now, none of these red zones are considered penalty zones, and there's no deduction for touching these zones. But, of course, you do have the potential of causing other issues, like if you are on the red on the end, on the dismount bed, most likely you are going to travel far into the landing area because you are not on a surface that is going to facilitate taking off straight up out of the double mini bed, as well as if you're on either side and you're touching those red, the likelihood that you're going to touch the pads and get that 1/10 of a point deduction for touching the pads. So you want to try to keep those athletes, of course, in the middle of the double mini. The next one that causes lots of deductions in double mini is where the athlete actually lands in the landing area. Now, we have some zone deductions in double mini. So one of the first questions was an athlete who actually landed in zone A and then took several steps and traveled from zone A to zone B and then again from zone B to zone C, and how those deductions are applied when the athlete is moving around the landing area or the landing zone. So let's talk about how we apply those deductions. Well, in this particular instance, the first deduction, of course, will be for instability. How many steps did they take in order to move through those zones? We're going to take 1/10 of a point for each step that they take. So most likely if this athlete is traveling from zone A to zone C, they probably took at least 3 or more steps. So we're going to take 3/10 for the instability. Now, these deductions are called landing deductions, and you're always going to take landing deductions the greater of which happens. So if the instability was the greatest that happened for that particular deduction, then we're going to take the instability deduction. So in this case, it's going to be 0.3. Now, there are additional deductions, and one of those is a changing zone deduction. Now, that athlete is going to receive a 0.1 because they changed zone. Now, it doesn't matter whether they change one zone or both zones. They're only going to get a maximum of 0.1 from each execution judge. So we'll take 3 for the step, 0.1 for changing zones, so a total of 0.4 for for this particular problem after the completion of the pass. Okay, on the other end of the spectrum, what if I have an athlete that lands in Zone C and takes steps back to Zone A? Well, the only deductions that are applied in this circumstance would again be, of course, landing in Zone C is 0.5, and then we're going to take those instability steps again. If there's 3 or more, we're going to take 0.3. But one of the things that is different in this situation is that that athlete is moving back to a safer zone on the landing area. So we do not want to punish that athlete for that because they are trying to get to a safer zone rather than traveling to the floor. So that deduction for changing zones, if you're going from a greater zone to the middle of the double mini landing area, is not going to be applied to the pass. So in this particular case, the 0.5 for landing in Zone C, and then the 0.3 of a point for instability. Now, one thing I want you guys to remember that in levels 1 through 7, that Zone A extends all the way forward on the landing area. So the levels 1 through 7 have a little bit more area in order to land, because we understand that sometimes when they take off out of the double mini, that they do not have that height that they need in order to travel all the way into that Zone A because of their stature. They're small, and so they don't have the capability in order to do that. Now, some other things that are important in double mini is the amplitude. Now, amplitude is the measurement of height of each scale that's performed. And so what we are looking for in double mini, especially on that dismount scale, is an increase in the amplitude. One of the ways that I like to think about it, or that I explain it when I teach judges course, is that we are looking for an M when that athlete performs a double mini pass. Of course, the scale is the first part of the M. The second one would be the second part of the M, but we want it to be at a greater height. So it looks and feels like it is the exclamation point at the end of a sentence is what we're looking for. A nice, strong finish with great height that it lands right in the middle of that Zone A. So what the double mini judges are looking for is an increase in that amplitude of the dismount scale. If the athlete doesn't show this increase, a deduction, of course, within our 5/10 for that dismount scale is going to be applied. Most likely, probably what has happened is that athlete has improper takeoff. So they are not standing up in the double mini. They are not have the chest up. They are not reaching up. They are probably more at an angle as they're coming off the double mini, which is causing that travel farther into the landing area, which, of course, will cause deductions for where they land within the landing zones as well. But we are looking for that greater amplitude. Now, there's really not a specific deduction for amplitude or loss of amplitude, or there's not a way to reward an athlete specifically for an increase in amplitude. But what it would do is affect that whether the athlete got a 0 deduction or whether they got a 5. So we're looking for that skill to show a greater height on that dismount. Now, this particular slide is something that's extremely important when you come to the testing component. You really need to pay attention and focus on what we're going to cover here. We have lots of rules and lots of places to find them. There are rules that govern the JO. There are rules that cover our elite program, and there are a lot of different places where you can find our rules. And Lakeisha's going to show us on the website kind of where we go and how to find the rules. Now, of course, the JO rules are something that you're going to order, but the elite rules can be found on the Trampoline and Tumbling page.
Okay. So we'll go to the Trampoline and Tumbling page for the rules. You'll just go to TNT at the top there on usagym.org, click on Rules, and then you can click on the Rules and Policies here and just select the section that you're wanting to look for. And we also have the Trampoline and Tumbling Code of Points available as well.
Okay, one thing, Lakeisha, will you scroll over there to the left, the technical updates in the errata? One of the things that everybody needs to do, whether you are a coach or a judge, this is an extremely important page for you, because if you purchased a code of points last year at the beginning of the new quad, there have been updates since then. So what you want to look for is on this page, you will scroll and you will find, and it will tell you whether or not there have been updates or not. You notice that on 3/10/2014, it says the jail code of points, tumbling errata has been updated. Those are pages that you will need to print in order to put your code of points into a perfect update status.
And we also have the Junior Olympic Code of Points here that you can, there's a couple different ways to get to the Code of Points, but one of the ways, if you're already here looking at the errata or the rules and policies, is to just click on the Junior Olympic Code of Points, which is the last option on the drop-down menu under Rules, and it takes you directly to our technical materials store where you can purchase the Code of Points.
And, of course, the Code of Points is one of the most important tools that any coach or judge can have. One of the most frustrating things is when you are trying to work with either a coach or a judge that doesn't have any set of rules or current set of rules. And it is to the benefit of your athlete to make sure that you have all the most current tools that are available in order to give them optimum training and competition experience. Okay, now we're going to kind of go through some of the rules and interpretations, some things that have come up, some questions that have come up, and how we apply some certain things. There's kind of been a big question about level 10 moving into an elite program and how they mobilize. Now, we've kind of always done our elite when they wanted to do mobility. That process has stayed very, very similar. But last year, the process for a level 10 in order to mobilize changed just a little bit, and so we want to make sure that everybody is following the proper procedures and that they don't miss out on opportunities for their level 10s to mobilize into that elite program. Now, each year, elite athletes are assigned to mobility competitions from the elite committee. And here you see the list of the mobility competitions for 2015. The first one is in Dallas. In Frisco, Allen, that one is in January. And second one is the Lincoln Cup in Springfield, Illinois. That one is February. And then the KLI Invitational, that one is in March in Salt Lake. Of course, the athletes can also use their respective regionals in any national competition. For example, the Elite Challenge, Stars and Stripes, U.S. Championship. Now, if there are national competitions in addition to these as well, those may be used also. So you need to be sure that if you do have an athlete that is level 10 or youth or junior or open, that these are the competitions that you would need to use if you are wanting to mobilize them to the next level. Now, the next thing that I really want the coaches to pay attention to and to focus on is that red card that sometimes you see a judge flash after a routine is complete. Now, I know a lot of times as a coach, you are ecstatic when that passes over. The athlete hit the pass, you're high-fiving, you're excited, you turn, you walk away, and you don't watch for any signaling that may happen after the routine is over. There are two things that you should always watch for. It's always important that you watch to see the DD is flashed to make sure that the athlete received the DD that you are expecting, and you need to watch for this red card. Because if you ever see a difficult to judge or a chair of the judges panel flash a red card, they're giving you a signal that your athlete was deemed to have performed something different than what was written on their competition card. Now, you may be aware that they changed something up, but there also may be a circumstance where the position was called. Let's say, for example, you had written double pike, and the judges called it double tuck. So you always want to watch for those two things. Those two signals are helping you to help the athlete and make sure that everything is called correctly, or whether or not you need to file what is called an inquiry. Now, there is a form on the website that is called the DD inquiry form. It is in our rules and policy section in the form, and it gives you the opportunity to approach the judging panel and just inquire as to what the difficulty was. So when you're watching for this red card, that will give you a signal. Then you can inquire. There is no fee. And the DD inquiry is not considered an appeal. It's just simply you asking. You don't have access to that DD inquiry form, say, for example, at a local meet, we always encourage coaches to ask those important questions at the end of a round. We do request that you not come up while we're scoring or in the middle of a round, but of course, we're there for you, and we're there to help you learn and get the information that you need in order to make sure that your athlete maybe doesn't, perhaps in tumbling, compete or repeat in that second pass. So we want to make sure you have all the information that you need. The next situation, of course, involves difficulty as well, and it's kind of how the rules are different from discipline to discipline, and what if an athlete exceeds the maximum pass difficulty. Now, in each discipline and each level, we have minimums and maximums about what the athletes can perform as far as difficulty is concerned. And what happens if they go over that difficulty? Well, in trampoline, it's very simple. If the maximum difficulty is 6'5", and your athlete does 6'7", they get 6'5". The difficulty judge will only flash a 6'5", so that would be one instance where you could not come up and say, why did you not give my athlete all of the difficulty, because this is all that is allowed. In tumbling and double meaning, however, it's a little bit different. The athlete receives the maximum difficulty allowed, and then each execution judge is going to take a 1.0 in tumbling. So once again, maximum difficulty, if it's 3.4, that 3.4 is all they'll get, but then they're also going to get a 1.0 deduction. The same applies in double meaning. That athlete will get the maximum DD allowed for that level, and then that 1.0 deduction from each execution judge's score. Now, there is a little bit of a different circumstance if the athlete exceeds the per skill difficulty. In levels 8 through 10, there are requirements in tumbling and double meaning, and that gives you a max per skill. So if the athlete exceeds this maximum skill difficulty, the way that we would apply the deductions, or the consequence in this case, it would be an interruption, because the athlete has performed what is considered an illegal skill. So let's say, for example, an athlete is only allowed to do a double tuck, and the athlete does a double pike. In that particular situation, the pass would be interrupted, and no skill after wherever the double pike was performed is counted. So the interruption, wherever the interruption occurs, that skill and nothing after it counts. Of course, all other deductions would be applied. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is arm positions. In all disciplines, doesn't matter whether it's trampoline, tumbling, double mini, the rules for arms are very simple. You have to be straight and above the head, straight and or close to the body. So depending on the movement of the skill, they can be slightly away from the body. The SIG deemed a couple of years ago that there would be a couple of circumstances that they would allow the arms to move away from the body. But I guess maybe my biggest question that I always get from coaches and from judges is, on twisting skills, is there a deduction for crossing your arms across your chest during the twisting phase? Well, as long as your arms are held in close to your chest, there's no deduction for this arm position. Now, you notice this athlete here in this picture, her elbows are in tight, her arms are in close to her chest, so this particular skill would not receive a deduction for arms. However, there are other flaws within the skill, for example, the feet, that would take that deduction. Now, in this particular photo, the arms are across the chest, of course, but if you'll notice, the elbows come away from the body. So this one would be a deduction. It would be 0.1, which is the maximum per arm. So wanting those athletes to keep those arms in nice and tight in order to avoid this deduction. Now, the one time that would allow an athlete to let their arms come away from a body, the FIG determined that an athlete uses their arms in order to stop twists. So anytime an athlete is performing a skill with rotation and twist, the arms are allowed to come away from the body if they are straight. And they can go up to 90 degrees, which is a lot. But it depends on the amount of rotation and the amount of twist whether or not the arm movement is allowed. For example, if they are performing a branny or a full or a double somersault with a half twist out, they can let those arms come 45 degrees away from the body. If they are doing a single somersault with more than a full twist, or they're doing multiple twisting somersaults, those arms can come a full 90 degrees in order to stop or slow that twist down. So we're not going to take a deduction for that. Now remember, however, the deduction for arms is only a tenth of a point. So judges, you need to make sure that you are tempering that deduction and not taking a tenth of a point for arms that are slightly away from the body, because those arms that are far away from the body on a scale that is not allowed or bent, one arm in front, one arm in back, all of those types of skills need to be sure that you are taking that 1/10 of a point deduction, which is the maximum for arms. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the opening of a somersault. Last year we talked about that holding or keeping, that we wanted to keep that body straight until that athlete got to horizontal, and that is in every discipline and every skill. So we are looking for that in that last skill in tumbling. We're looking for that holding or keeping position in double mini, and we're looking for that holding and keeping position in trampoline as well. But this year we're not going to stress over that. For those of you who missed out last year, I do want you to be sure that you pay a little bit closer attention to that in your training, that you're teaching those athletes to hold and keep, because depending on when they break that position, like say, for example, if they are piking down, it's 0.2 if they pike down between 1 and 2 o'clock, 0.1 if they pike down between 2 and 3, and if they're tucking down after they extend, then they will have a little bit bigger of deductions, 0.3, and if they tuck between 1 and 2, 0.2 if they tuck between 12 and 1 is 0.3, 1 and 2 is 0.2, and then if there is a big tuck down, I'm saying this backwards, 3/10 if they tuck down between 12 and 1, 2/10 between 1 and 2, and 1/10 between 2 and 3. Sorry about that, but we want them to keep that. Now, you'll notice here, this is a slide that comes out of the FIG Code of Points. Now, you have access to this FIG Code of Points. It's free. It's on the FIG website. You just go to rules, and then you go to the trampoline, and you have access not only to the rules, but also a lot of documents that show you pictures, for example, like this one. I know this one might be a little bit difficult for you to see, but what we're going to talk about is the opening of that somersault and how you avoid those deductions. Well, of course, the way you avoid them is you open or kick out between 12 and 1 o'clock. You'll notice the athlete over there on the right, totally straight body between 12 and 1 o'clock. The next slide is going to show us the deduction of an athlete that is going to get a deduction because of a little bit later kick out or maybe no kick out at all. In tumbling, of course, the exception to the rule is double pike and double straight are going to be the only two skills that we're expecting a kick out at between 12 and 1. Multiple somersaults do need to extend, but the severity for that deduction is not a full 3/10 of a point. No kick out at all in all skill is going to be 0.3. Okay, here's that slide I was looking for. Skills opening between 12 and 1 o'clock. Of course, no deduction. You see nice, long, straight body line, legs together, toes pointed, and a perfectly straight line at 12 o'clock. So this athlete would not have a deduction. Next one is going to be a little bit later of a kick out. This athlete is kicking out between 1 and 2 o'clock. This deduction would be 0.1 if the kick out happens here. This athlete is at horizontal, and you notice he is still in the tuck position, so there was no extension whatsoever. So whether it is a kick out at 3 o'clock or there is no kick out at all, then the deduction would be 0.3. The next one is levels 1 through 4. Now we have those additions or exceptions to the rule, either way you want to look at it for levels 1 through 4, if there are deviations from the routine. Seems that there's been a lot of confusion in how these particular rules have been applied from either state to state or region to region. So what we wanted to do is we just wanted to kind of clarify how this happens. So if you deviate from the compulsory routine, on the first deviation, levels 1 through 4, we are not going to interrupt the pass. You are going to score the skill as an execution judge no matter what it is. If it is supposed to be a cartwheel and the athlete performs a handstand roll, then you're going to look at the handstand roll and you're going to determine whether the legs were together The toes were pointed. There was a nice long extension in the trunk of the body. The arms were straight, and you're going to take deductions accordingly. Now, once the routine is over, the chair of the judges panel is going to instruct you on taking an additional deduction of 3.0 for that first deviation. That is taken in addition to each deduction that you have taken for each skill. Now, the second deviation is going to cause a little bit of an additional consequence. So you're going to score the routine, same as the first circumstance. First deviation is going to take a 3.0, but then if the athlete deviates the second time, the chair of the judges panel is going to instruct the judges to not only take a 3.0, but then they'll interrupt the routine where the second deviation happens. So let's say, for example, it's supposed to be a 5-skill routine. They deviated on the second and the fifth skill. We would judge that routine out of 4 skills. So your maximum mark would be 9, and then you would take your first 4 deductions for skills and that 3.0 deduction off your total allowed, which was the 9.0. Now, other reasons that we might interrupt a pass in levels 1 through 4 would be, of course, things that are unsafe. If an athlete fell, if they were touched by a spotter, if they tumbled off the tumbling floor or left the trampoline for any reason. So anything that is deemed unsafe would also cause an interruption. Now, you need to look at that code of points for complete rules for levels 1 through 4 because there are a few circumstances when it's different from what we do at the upper levels. Now, instability. I get this question a lot. What is the best thing for my athlete to do once they land? If they land with their feet apart, is it better for them to stand in that position for the full 3 seconds so that they don't get any deduction? Well, kind of depends on how far apart the feet are and what the athlete is capable of doing at that point. If they land with their feet about shoulder width apart, they should be able to slide their heels together. If they are able to do that, there would be no deduction, and they can stand to that upright correct position. If they do not land with their feet shoulder width apart and are farther than that, or feet are from front to back apart, they need to step back to correct, because if they stand with those feet apart, no matter whether there is movement in the feet or the body, whatever, if they are standing totally stone cold still, we are still going to take 1/10 of a point because they are not standing in the correct and upright position. So we want them upright saluting the judges. So it's best if they land and step together. Now, if they land and step back, please remember that the best scenario for them to do in order to avoid additional deductions is use the same leg to step back to correct. So if they land and step back with the right foot, they should use the right foot or the right leg to step back to correct in order to avoid those additional deductions. What if an athlete lands in the squat? A lot of times we see them landing in a squatted position in double mini and tumbling as well, and they're thinking that they don't want to stand up straight because that's movement, so they'll just remain in that squatted position. But of course, the athlete has to land in this squatted position because their knees have to be bent in order to absorb the floor or in order to kill the elasticity of the bend. So you are going to see a knee bend when they come into that landing surface. However, if they stay in that squatted position, we are going to take 1/10 of a point for instability and for not returning to that upright position. Again, we want to see a nice tall body. So be sure that they're always standing up. The next thing that we're going to talk about is there have been a couple of updates as far as our equipment specifications for sanctioned events. Now, for JO levels, level A through Elite, they must follow the FIG apparatus norms that are listed in the FIG Code of Points. This includes the matting that goes around the trampoline on the floor. So if you are having a competition this year or you're going to be a meet director, you need to be sure that you have the appropriate equipment in order to follow those guidelines for the matting around the trampoline. The other thing that has been added that is new is we have added the requirements for in-ground trampolines. There's never been any specifications as far as ceiling height or anything like that in our rules and policies, and we have added that this year. We've also added that a level 1 through 7 has to have 6 meters from the floor, which is 19.75 feet, and that for levels 8 through senior elite, they have to have at least 7, which is 23 feet. Now, this ceiling height is measured from the surface of the bed. So if it is the in-ground trampoline, that is the measurements that you would have to have. The next thing is just some elite updates. We are trying really hard to use the FIG code of points as much as possible. So in the elite division only, there's a couple of things that we are now going to take from the total score that in the past we have taken from each execution judge's score out of a matter of convenience. The programming, the scoring process that we used when we took it off the total score, a lot of times it created confusion. But we do have the means in order to take this deduction now and it show on the scoring sheet or the scoring process, the board that shows that it is an extra deduction. The two that we will be taking now from that total score is if they have improper attire. This one will come off the total score, and if they have used some warm-up time, that one will now come off the total score as well. Depending on the discipline, as far as that deduction for the warm-up will come off each total score rather than the execution score. Now remember, this is just for elite. The JO is still the same. Another big thing that's a change this year is the ages for our elite levels. As you'll notice now, the youth elite is now 11 to 14. Juniors are 15 to 16, and the open or senior are 17 plus. This way, we're not creating any of that potential of crossover that we had last year, where if you were youth, you had to you could either be youth or junior, and the same with the age 17 last year with juniors and open or senior. So we have changed those up just a little bit in order to take care of those situations. Now, qualifications to the U.S. Gymnastics Championship. This year you can use state, regionals, or the elite challenge. There will be a process of scores or difficulty requirements. That all should be posted on the website and should be available to you no later than December the 31st this year. So you need to be sure that you keep an eye out for that and make sure that you know what your kids need in order to qualify for nationals. Now, the other thing that we want to encourage you to do is we want you to be sure that you are keeping all of your requirements up to date on your professional membership. We do realize that we have added more specifications in order for you to keep current, but as a professional, it is extremely important that you show to the coaching community, to the parents, and to your athletes that you are doing what it takes in order to maintain a good current professional membership. Also remember that if you are a coach or a judge and you sign in and attend a sanctioned competition and participate, and you do not have these current requirements, that you could possibly incur sanction violations as well as the meet director. So we want to be sure that you are keeping everything current. And Lakeisha is going to cover some things to make sure that everyone understands what your requirements are for this upcoming year.
Okay, thanks, Patty. So it is important that you do have an active membership. And when we say active membership, that means your professional membership is current for the season, that you have a current background check, and safety risk management certification. So on this slide where we're talking about the membership requirements, the professional and all membership renewals are due every year on July 31st. Background checks are also due every July, or they expire every July 31st of every 2 years from the year that you took it. It can take up to 2 weeks or longer to receive your background check results. So be sure to take the background check or have your background check reissued before your expiration date. For your safety risk management certification, that also is a renewal that's done every 4 years, and it expires July 31st every 4 years from the year that you took it. So this course can actually be done online or done as a live course. I'm going to share the page here just to show you all where you can go to find more information on the background check and the safety. You'll click on Member Services, For background check information, you can go on the left-hand side, click on background check, and then click on the frequently asked questions here in regards to seeing your timelines and what the background check is covering and the company that we work with for the background checks. And for the safety risk management course, you'll click on education here and then scroll down on the page. And my page is loading here. So you'll scroll down to the complete course catalog, which is just in the middle of the page here. And under the complete course catalog, you'll just select the name of the course, which is under the School of Recreational Gymnastics. It's the U101 Safety Risk Management course. And on this page, just familiarize yourself with the timeline, the requirements, and registration. So those are our membership requirements there. Our other certifications, of course, is for the coaches, requirements, and judges. It's a T200 T01 Development Coaches course, Level 1, and hands-on training. You can currently take this course as a live course. You can go to that education page we just showed a moment ago and click on upcoming live courses to view the live courses that are offered in your particular area. It does require both the class and the hands-on spotting. This course was formerly known as the Level 1 Coaches course for those of you who knew it as that course previously. The U100 Fundamentals of Gymnastics Instruction, this course is only a requirement for professional members who are using their professional membership to coach in the field of play. The U100 is not required for professional members who are using their membership for judging. So just keep that in mind. It is a complimentary course for membership, so as a paid member, there is no fee for the course. So it's a wonderful course for judges to take, and you are welcome to take it, but it is not a requirement. It's only a requirement for our professional members that are coaching on the field of play. The course completion does not expire, and it does grant you instructor certification once you do complete the U100 Fundamentals of Gymnastics Instruction. For the T210, all judges and coaches are required to have the T210 each year. So this is a course that can only be taken as a webinar, and it must be completed prior to being on the competition floor of any sanctioned event. And there are other courses here that we've also suggested, which is the first aid course, our CPR course, our concussions course, and of course state and regional congress. So all of the course information or any educational information you'll find on USA Gymnastics on our website, usagym.org, and click on the education page.
Thanks, Lakeisha. The last thing that we want to encourage each one of you to do is to reach out if you ever have questions. We will be keeping a Q&A that is hopefully updated on a weekly or biweekly basis throughout the year of questions that come up during the year. That will be on that Just for Judges and Coaches page that we looked at on that Trampoline and Tumbling page earlier. But if you want to reach out to any or all of us, please do that. We give you the information for technical questions. Those can be sent to me, and then I will send them on to my appropriate committee member if needed. And then, of course, JO questions will go to Peter Dodd. There's his email address. And then George Drew will take care of all of our elite committee questions, and there's his email as well. And we do want to encourage you to send those questions via email or to call, and we'll post those questions for viewing on the website. So we want to make sure that you get those answers as quickly as you possibly can during the year.
So our course, you won't be taking the course right now. You'll be viewing the course materials, but you will have to register and take the course after viewing the materials that Patty has covered in this webinar. So each question does have to be answered before you can advance to the next question, and the T210 certificate will automatically be posted to your membership profile under course history once it is completed. To register for the course, you'll follow these steps here. You'll click on the education page, select the Complete Course Catalog option, and then select the T210 Trampoline and Tumbling Annual Update. There is an Add to Cart button to your right in red that will be there for you to click on to complete the registration process and begin taking the course.
Perfect. I just want to tell you thank you for participating in the webinar today. I hope that you walk away with some information that is useful to you. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you on the competition floor this year and making sure that your athlete has the best opportunity to excel at what we all are passionate about, which is trampoline and tumbling.
Perfect. So this concludes our T210 annual update. Thank you all once again for attending, and this is USA Gymnastics. Begin here, go anywhere. Recording.